All right, guys. MJ Ortiz, Bob Trait.
Hello.
We're here. We're going to talk a little Toys R Us today. Before we get started, if you do pop in the live stream and you have any questions, just go ahead and throw them in. Evan's going to read them to us as we go along here. Admittedly, we are not 100% experts on this situation. We're going to be talking from the perspective of what's been reported on so far,
Sure.
and taking our knowledge from being in the fulfillment and e-commerce industry for many years, and just being in the industry of buying and selling businesses that kind of relate to what they do. Not exactly brick and mortar, but the online e-retail side of it. We are not going to go through the absolute history of what occurred with Toys R Us. We're hoping that everything works out. We're optimistic, but right now the writing on the wall does not look good. In the future, we will do a more in-depth piece on what kind of got Toys R Us to where they are today. Before we get into it, Bob's got a couple, quick stories he's going to go over, and then, we're going to go into it from there. So,
Well, first thing that we'll talk about, or that I'll talk about, is that I went to Toys R Us yesterday here in Cherry Hill, not far from where we're located, and the word is that Cherry Hill store will be closing. And I thought, okay, well, what's different than when we went there a week to 2 weeks ago for our Into the Wild episode? And to tell you the truth, besides the amount of people that were in there, the sales were all exactly the same. So it looks like everything is at a hold pattern. The word is out, obviously, because there were a lot of people in there for 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And people were shopping, they were buying, the kids were in there picking stuff out. But as people who go there on a regular basis to go and look for figures and, the Marvel stuff that we want to get and the DC figures and such, that it was exactly the same. And I didn't really see anything different. And then even then, there was some new product on the shelf, which we were told they weren't getting any more new product. So we was a little shocked by that. Another thing that I wanted to say is that I actually once applied to work at Toys R Us. And so did our founder, Jarrett Cruz. Now, when Jarrett Cruz was home after his accident and he was able to go back to work, he applied to work at Toys R Us. He was not hired. Here's a guy who had at the time about 10,000 people on a Facebook group page. So he was well versed in the world of toys. He had written several toy reviews. They didn't want to hire him. For me at the time, when I applied, I was working as a news editor for a website, which meant my hours in the morning were kind of light because I was on the East Coast. You wait for a lot of West Coast pop culture news to come out from California. I had all these hours in the morning where nothing would happen. So I tried to get a flow team job. Now, a flow team job is people that unload a truck and then pack it and then unpack it and then put it out in the store. So for Toys R Us, at the time, I had written a toy column for 3 years about action figures and all the new movie toys. I even told the people who were doing my interview that I had been to Toy Fair for the last 6 years in a row. She never acknowledged the fact that I went to Toy Fair or that she knew what Toy Fair was.
yeah, I have a feeling that when you said Toy Fair, she just went,
Like I went to a convention. At like a convention you would go to at like your local, motel, hotel, putting it on, not the actual, media, industry, press event that was there. So I wasn't hired. I wasn't hired to unbox boxes and put them in, despite the fact that I had a college degree and that I knew all of the toy industry. They even asked me, how well do you know toys? And I said, well, I've been writing a toy column for the last 3 years. Nothing. So clearly, and then I looked at the people they did hire, because, when they have that 24 hours at Toys R Us when they're open and you can actually go in at those different hours, and then you wonder, who's making these decisions here at Toys R Us?
Well, I mean, there's always the chance, too, that management is intimidated by somebody who may have a college degree and a lot more knowledge. So coming into there, they're now saying, in a place that has turnover like Toys R Us, 6 months to a year, you could be, gunning for their spot, which, doesn't help whatsoever, because I can't tell you how many times I walk into Toys R Us, ask a question about something that's popular and, out on the shelves, and they look at me like, I'm asking about produce.
Right. And I would say that there is a Toys R Us that I go to in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is not far from my parents' house. And that's essentially my Toys R Us. I think that was the one that opened when I was in college. And when I would go home to visit them, I'd swing in there. There is a guy in there. You ask him, he knows exactly what you're talking about when it comes to superheroes and Star Wars and everything. I actually don't ask anybody else unless I see that one guy. And I even pointed out to him people who had pulled out Build-A-Figure packages. He got so angry that he took all the Build-A-Figures that had been basically been stolen from and went to the manager and said, look, this is still happening. We have to do something. But I'm sure that nothing really happened.
Mike DePace commented saying they wanted a doctorate degree in toys, apparently. The winky face.
Apparently. And it was just, Mike, it was just to work a holiday help. Because I had the extra hours, I had the time, and I thought, hey, I'll go in there, and I'll know what's coming in at Toys R Us, and I'll be able to help out my own collection and make money doing it at the same time. And I know there's several Toys R Us's that I've been to that the managers, you ask a manager, do you have this, do you have that? I would say, well, then your employees are probably just buying them out of the boxes. And she said, no, my employees are not allowed to do that. So that was a good one. And that was one down in Delaware, and that one's slated to close.
Yeah. Well, I think that, that's kind of segues us in. So as we go along here, Evan has some questions. Evan, as the noob, is a lot newer to this. So, as all this is going on, he's been kind of asking us and saying, hey, what does this mean? What's going on? So we're going to kind of talk as we go along here from the perspective of, hey, here's what's been reported on, and here, as a business owner, would I step in and take a look at the books and see, what would be attractive and what would be unattractive from a business perspective if you're going to try to save Toys R Us? So, the flagship stuff is first, let's talk, well, before we get into it, though none of this is confirmed, if they do go into administration, which is what this is looking like, your gift cards may not be safe. Okay, they may honor them up into some point here. They may say that in administration they have to suspend it completely. I think you're going to get an honor to date, just because they don't want to completely turn off people from coming in the store. And the gift cards, you may come in with a $15 gift card but still spend $30, so they might be biting some sales effort there. But if you have gift cards, I suggest use them now, because they are going to be obsolete here if they go into administration and then liquidate from there. Okay,
I have 3 in my coat now that I've been dying to use. But the funny thing is, there's nothing that I want whenever I go to Toys R Us.
And I have to shout out to my wife. She did ask me a couple days ago, hey, should we use these gift cards? And stupidly I said, no, we'll be fine. And then it just got worse this week from what we've heard. So top level before we hit the UK, or before we hit US Toys R Us, UK is in administration right now. Okay, it just came out. BBC has been reporting on it. Administration basically means that the government has now stepped in, and that any business decisions throughout there will ramp down over the next 6 weeks, have to be agreed upon between the government or the banks that own the majority of the debt and the actual executive team over there. They can't just make whatever decisions they want any longer. Everything has to be controlled. In the UK, the highlights from what BBC put out was they have a $15 million tax bill. Okay, so normally in these situations, if it's the government that's stepping in, they're going to be the first ones who get paid off. Okay, and then from there you have your secured debtors. So those are people that when Toys R Us entered into the agreement to borrow against them or purchase stock from them, or product, they were secured or backed by some version of the assets. Again, that doesn't mean that they're going to get paid back if there's not money to be there, but they get paid before non-secured debtors. Okay, so those guys are at the absolute bottom of the pile, which will really hurt, because I'm sure in the UK, and we've met with them before, there's a bunch of really nice, smaller toy chains that are doing like the Thunderbirds, and they're going to hurt from this because they can end up getting stiffed on a large portion of their bills. That's what they're using to continue with their company. The other thing that came out of that was that, the current administration team had worked with over 120 different providers to try to sell, see if they could come step in and do it. But because of the way that Toys R Us's name is owned and a bunch of the other intricacies between Toys R Us and Babies R Us, none of the 120 that they worked with were able to see a clear path. Some just wanted to purchase stock, some wanted to help out in different ways, but nobody could kind of wrap their head around the whole thing, which I think as we get into talking about Toys R Us US is going to be the main issue in them getting saved here as well. Evan, did you have anything?
There was one person, William D, is asking when do we think that the stores will close in the U.S.
Well, again, this is we're March 14th when we're having this, so
Happy Pi Day.
Happy Pi Day to everybody. This is a little preemptive, but in seeing what happened with the UK announced about 2 weeks ago that they were going to begin to go into liquidation. They just are now in administration to get that figured out, and they are going to close their doors in 6 weeks from today. So best case scenario, maybe 3 months, but assuming that we hear what we're supposed to hear tomorrow, less a white knight coming in and figuring out how to figure out all of the different things to save this, you're probably going to see by the end of March entering administration, which will begin a liquidation process. Now, the UK has much less stores than the US, which means the liquidation of all their assets, furnishings in the stores will take longer because it's 800, even though it's been pared down 180, which are going to be closed out by April 1st or April 15th. Right. You might see 90 days, but you're not going to. I would say that if we hear tomorrow what we're all scared of hearing, you will not be able to have your next holiday season at Toys R Us, which would be a very sad thing for everybody.
Jose Rivera was saying that he worked at Toys R Us in Central Illinois for on and off for about 5 years, and the higher ups have no clue what the customer/collectors want.
Jose, you are 100% correct. We couldn't agree with you more over here. And we'll kind of address this, but essentially what happened was back in 2005, and we're not going to get real deep into all the numbers, but in 2005 is when Toys R Us really started to see pressure from Walmart, Target, and what was the beginnings of online e-retail, really at that point. And as their model, which was we're too big to fail, started to fade away from them, they sold to Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts for $6.6 billion. That was the private equity firm that came in and purchased them. And now in September they entered into bankruptcy for $4.9 billion, which means for what they sold, they've continued to incur debt for the last 13 years. And to be real honest, I don't know what they've done to diversify in those 13 years. They've kind of stayed tried and true to the original business model, which has been failing, but from an executive approach or the high level, what you're talking about, Jose, they don't care because they've got guaranteed contracts. They've got, what they call a golden parachute or buyout. So if they're going to get fired, they're going to get money when they leave the door. If it closes, they really don't care. And in a lot of times when private equity comes in, unless it's making a ton of money, what they're going to continue to do is pay back their own debt to themselves and just bleed and bleed and bleed, because at the end of the day, they'll come pretty solvent here when everything goes kaput, if that's what happens.
Jason Nelson said, at this point, I think our only hope is less a white knight and more of a black mouse. Do you want to explain what those two terms mean?
I'm very familiar with the white knight. The black mouse is a little unfamiliar to me. So a white knight essentially would be one entity, and that might be comprised of various other smaller companies coming in to essentially at this point salvage what is left of Toys R Us. So they'll come in, they'll negotiate on their behalf, they'll stop it from going insolvent for the time being, and attempt to right the ship. And, still people get burnt in these scenarios because they're probably only going to get paid 20, 30 cents on the dollar for what's owed in debt, but they'll get some money versus what could be absolutely no money.
Jason Nelson was saying, I think a black mouse was a Disney joke.
That Disney would come in and buy it. Kind of like what Disney did with Marvel. because Marvel was kind of hurting at the time. Well, I wouldn't say as much, but they were hurting, and then they kind of came in and saved the day.
Go ahead.
Eduardo A says maybe they're just retooling their manage and business structure because they're not closing in Canada.
Again, Canada is its own entity, just like UK is. From what we hear, it's actually one thing that I'd like to do some more research on, because we hear that business is pretty solid in the UK. They have a lot less stores there. I'm sorry, in Canada. I apologize. Yeah. They have a lot less stores there, and I'm sure they will stay for the time being. But when you lose your UK, you lose your US. That's where the majority of the buying power is coming from.
And it's a US company. Too.
Yeah, it's
not like it's
company.
An Asian company or
So and we did read that in Asia that Toys R Us is already working with a partner to essentially sell off their assets and rebrand. So you may keep your Toys R Us locations, but they may no longer be Toys R Us. Mm-hmm. But essentially, if let's just say 80% of the purchasing is done between the UK and the US. Now, if the Canadian Toys R Us stay in business, they have 80% less volume to purchase from Hasbro or Mattel, which means they'll be paying a lot more for their product, which may put them at a disadvantage in these next upcoming years. No, if they're there,
if they find a way.
Yeah.
Bailey has a comment. The thing I like about Toys R Us is it's has the most variety. We have comic book shop here. They have more brands, but not as much a selection. I went to Toys R Us the other day and I saw a bunch of NECA figures, which Walmart, Target, and Tropico, don't have. And that's sad because it seems to me the other stores have the same old generic things. If these other stores start buying Diamond Select and such, I'd have more faith. As for White Knight, he really thinks that Disney will be in.
Yeah. So, Bailey, I think you're right. I mean, we all love Toys R Us for various reasons. And without Toys R Us, you'd have, for the collector's market, Mezco's starting to get into Toys R Us. You've got NECA. You've got, their little collector's corner that you just don't see anywhere else. And it will be very hard for NECA and Mezco to meet the obligations of a Walmart or an Amazon for stock across the country, because Walmart doesn't so much care about selling in 50 or 60 of their locations. If they cannot sell in all of their locations, they won't do business with you. And, as it relates to just some smaller properties, I mean, Jessica Napkin, one of the great admin mods from the group, she loves the Grocery Gang. I don't know that without Toys R Us that would be nearly as possible. I mean, I saw those breaking in Toys R Us about a year or so ago with my son, absolutely love them, and now I'm starting to see them everywhere. Now, they may have been out from the beginning, but Toys R Us is where you come to see all the new stuff, and you're not going to get that in what is 8 to 10 aisles at a Target or a Walmart. You're just not going to get that chance.
Well, the one thing I noticed is, since we're able to look at a lot of our metrics for how old the junkies are, their general age group, and we're pretty much between, I'd say, 25 and 45, a lot of the junkies. And what I kind of noticed is we were editing the last episode of Into the Wild, and we go to a Toys R Us, a GameStop, and we go to an FYE. And if you don't know what that is, they used to sell music, but now they sell a lot of pop culture stuff. And for someone who's a consumer and looking at those things, did I say Toys R Us? We went to Toys R Us too? Mm-hmm. Okay. There was more of what I wanted as a collector at FYE and GameStop than there was at Toys R Us. Toys R Us, it's almost a joke in the episode because we're going and we're finding Constable Zuvio again. We're finding the exact same DC Universe figures. But yet, when we go to GameStop, there is a DJ from the Black Series. There is Jana Solo from the Black Series. We go to FYE, and it's all these pops. It's all the NECA. It's all the Mezco. It's the giant 18-inch Freddy Kruegers and things. So FYE is going to collapse too.
It's great to see that.
It's just weird how that all is falling into place, and the things that we really want aren't really going to be anywhere soon.
And the problem is that as great as it is to see that at your FYE and your GameStop, is that they are about 15 to 20% more expensive at the locations because they can't purchase in the volume that Toys R Us has been able to purchase in.
No, they get one or two.
Exactly. So even though Toys R Us may only get 2 or 3 quarter scale NECA Ninja Turtles, they're selling them between 87 and 110.
Mm-hmm.
You see that same Ninja Turtle for $130 at FYE. And this is only going to affect, if you're in this industry, this is a bad omen for you. For pricing, especially over the next few months, you're going to see, without Toys R Us, these companies that have committed obligations from Toys R Us through so many years, once those contracts are broken, they'll need to make up the difference. They've already entered into build. Most production on a toy is what, 9 to 12 months from what we understand. Yeah. So if you were planning on getting ready for holiday season 2018, you're gearing up to supply your Toys R Us, which is 15 to 20% of the overall toy sales in the United States. You now have to fill that obligation and sell that to someone, or you're going to have to adjust the cost on your current model in order to stay solvent yourself. So I wouldn't be surprised, and I believe CNBC mentioned this. A lot of small toy companies are going to be in jeopardy here, and you're most likely going to see Hasbro and Mattel, and this is where I think Disney, Bailey, back to what you were saying, is going to step up. You're going to see smaller toy companies get added to their portfolios. So they're going to go out, they're going to purchase these smaller guys. They know that they're wounded now. They know that they're going to need cash influx. And what you're going to see is more standardization, more corporate influence in your smaller collector-focused brands, which can be good in some cases. You're going to get better production. You're going to get better, materials used, but you're not going to be able to get those really cool, interesting things that collectors go, I mean, how cool is it to have an accessory pack for your Friday the 13th figures?
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, and that's why, you could check it out on our YouTube page when these guys met with McFarlane at Toy Fair this year. The reason why McFarlane can do all of these really cool building sets and action figures that give you everything you want and Easter eggs is because McFarlane owns the company. They're a private company owned by them. If they can afford to do it, they will. They're not obligated to a board of investors that don't care about if you really like the product or not. They just want to know if you're going to buy it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to hurt all of us as a collective.
And McFarlane is at Walmart. They are at Target. So you can actually, they don't have the necessity of, we're only at a Toys R Us, limited, exclusive deal or whatever. You can go and buy their things at Target.
Well, just real quick before we go into some more of the finer points of this Toys R Us issue, a lot of people have been saying this, and we'd love to hear your feedback on it. Exclusives. There are Toys R Us exclusives that have came out over the last few years. They've been doing Toys R Us exclusive for years and years. There are some that are coming out right now as this is continuing to unfold. What will that do in value? Are you going to see a pop in value here just because it's got that Toys R Us exclusive sticker because you can't get it anywhere else now?
Well, this was something that when we were talking about this here, is that we were talking to the noob about Wizard World magazine, and there used to be a Toy Fair magazine, and they used to release an exclusive figure every so many months, an oddball thing here and there. And now those figures are really sought after because they were a niche group that you had to order from the magazine, maybe order them online at the time. That was a rare thing. So if you wanted like a Red Arrow, an Alex Ross, Kingdom Come figure, you had to get it from them. Now those are really...
I have my Emerald Green Lantern Toy Fair that I absolutely love. Nice. And I didn't pay much for it.
No, not at the time.
I bought this a couple years ago, though. So
but it's still a rare thing, and a lot of things that people don't know about. But now I'm thinking Toys R Us, that those exclusive deals they have.
Yeah, well,
it can come and go. Like, let's say Walmart. The Infinity Thanos that we have back here on the wall. Is he going to be sitting on the? Is he going to be sitting on the shelf for the next 6 to 10 months? because they just order too many.
Yeah.
And does that ruin an exclusive deal? I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but Toys R Us had exclusives, and they just sat there.
I think it'll be really interesting.
Give me 1 second. You slowed down.
I think we're back. Sorry, we had a little.
We're back.
We're back.
We're live. We're back.
I will destroy you.
So are we down?
Yeah.
All right. We're having technical difficulties. Now we're back.
No.
I believe we're live again.
Oh, we're back.
All right, we're back. Sorry if we lost you. I'm sure we probably lost some people in there.
Yeah.
We'll get back to the questions there in a second. It looks like the Toys R Us gods weren't happy with us.
Right.
God, where were we?
I don't know. Let's just do some questions again.
Yeah,
we'll get us back on track.
Let's hop into questions. Oh, we were talking about Toys R Us exclusives. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So last thing on the Toys R Us exclusives.
Oh, with your questions.
Exactly. Your questions can wait, guys.
I remember my train of thought.
What I have to say is important, obviously. I think it'll be really interesting if we hear tomorrow that Toys R Us is going to shutter over the next, 6 to 8 to 12 weeks. If you go to that store, how many only at Toys R Us sticker toys are you really going to see left? I mean, you got to figure that the people in the collecting industry are going to jump in and go pretty crazy over it.
And I think we're also, this is not exactly on that, but we're also starting to see people posting images on the page about this Toys R Us. This Toys R Us is not closing. So we're starting to see that as well. And two near me are not closing, but yet here,
that's one of the
all be closing.
That's one of the really interesting things about what the news is doing today. So just to clear this up, 800 stores, 180 have been slated to close for months now, closing on either April 1st or April 15th. The news is taking those pictures of we're going out of business and acting like that's every Toys R Us.
Right.
This is sensational. This is not the case, though it probably will be the case. As of this date, that is not confirmed. What is confirmed is 180 Toys R Us's are going to control close by April 1st or April 15th.
And I think it's hysterical that the pictures they're using in all the outlets are saying store closing. We've been to 3 of the stores that are closing. None of them have that big sign that says store closing. Now, the Kmart down the street did, which you went in and tried to pilfer a whole bunch of stuff. But you said there was really no real deals left.
Evan, just so you know, a Kmart was another store like Walmart. Okay,
Yeah, it was like
just
Walmart.
we'd like to fill the noob in on
we
stuff
like to
that
help
he doesn't know.
him learn.
There was one comment from Mike DePace before we had the whole mess up from the TRU gods. Was that he was saying that the Amazon effect is having probably has a real effect on this, and then it's also that a Facebook group like the book junkies is probably had the same thing a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's really great, Mike. No, you're right, and to be frankly honest, Amazon is affecting every business, toy business, any brick and mortar store. From what we do, e-commerce, retail, fulfillment, we now have to compete with Amazon in everything they do. And the new thing that Amazon is going to do that's really going to hurt, they're now going after UPS and FedEx. They're going to start to deliver packages for other companies in large cities where they have hubs, which slowly and surely will be every major city. So you'll get to a point where not only will you get 1 to 3 hour delivery if you're in a large hub city, if you're a company, they're going to be actively undercutting the market like they've done for everything in shipping. So, one of the big things we always talk about here is how do we save on shipping? UPS, FedEx, USPS. We could have a fourth contender in that, which will be Amazon here in the next 3 to 5 years and really change, everything that people do.
And to go with that, before we started, Evan had some questions that we were going through about what we were going to talk about today. And one of his questions was, do you think that you could have a smaller toy store business, like a mom and pop, small business toy store? Do you think that they could come back? It was something like that, right, Evan?
I was wondering whether something like Toys R Us could actually continue to function in a more in this modern type of Amazon and Walmart and Target, considering you have people are going to Toys R Us because they just want toys, but people are going to Target and Walmart because they want other things, but they can also pick up toys.
So I think the answer to that question is yes. Okay, so Toys R Us right now equates to 15 to 20% of the overall toy industry on a yearly basis, which means they own enough of that market segment that they can be profitable. The issue is cost of entry at this point. So to come in fresh, if they can't figure out how to pick the bones clean of what might be left of Toys R Us here and utilize their current brick and mortar locations to start fresh, I don't think there's a company out there that can invest the amount of money into infrastructure, the actual employees, advertising, cost of education, and capture that back in order for it to make money. If somebody could come in and fix the model, i.e., come in, be that white knight that they're looking for, or wait until all the blood is drawn, purchase the Toys R Us name, and try to pick up what relationships they can, there's somewhat of an opportunity there, but it's a really hard battle. Purely on paper, 15 to 20% of that industry, it's doable. But to just enter into it now, it'll be really hard. And I think Evan had another question too.
Or whether, if you had the money, whether you would be able to do it.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. If you have the money, would you be that white knight? And if you had to ask me, I would say I wouldn't. So if you took a look purely at their debt to income ratio, okay, it's a bad buy. But now it's not just about debt to income, how much money they have on the books and inventory. There's all of these other things that have to be negotiated. The second that you come in, you now have to renegotiate your buying terms with all of your vendors. With Toys R Us this week starting the default on vendor payments, you're now going to come in behind the 8 ball. You're not getting that one up or getting the advantageous portion of that and getting additional discounts or that major buying power, because whoever comes in, they're not going to be keeping 620 stores. They're going to drop that down to a few hundred, so instantly your buying power is held back. Then you've got to negotiate with all the current debtors, which could be hundreds or more, up to the tune of $4.9 billion, and say, listen, here's how much we can pay you or you don't get paid. All of this takes time. None of it's guaranteed that it'll really pay off. Mm-hmm. Then you've got to make sure you purchase the name. I don't think anybody could do an asset deal here with the amount of money that's owed, and we're not really sure how much at this point the government is owed. Because private companies that are debtors, it's bad, you have to deal with them, but once the government is owed money in taxes, they have the ability to shut you down and cease your operations, where the rest of the people have to go through court in order to do that, and it can drag on. So as much as I'd love to say it's a no-brainer, it's a very uphill battle for whoever that white knight would have to be. And, Disney, right? Everybody thinks Disney's out there buying and buying and buying. Why would they enter into what could be a nightmare of litigation and years to get everything diced out when they can wait for it to fall and emerge from there? They have the money. So it becomes, if it's going to cost me, $2 billion to clean up the $5 billion mess, why don't I take that $2 billion, open up 50 or 100 stores myself in what is the vacated Toys R Us locations anyway, advertise and go from there. And the other, one last thing, Bob, the other big issue that somebody as a white knight has coming in is they have to not only revamp everything of the current infrastructure because it's a losing model. They now need to re-educate their customers who have been burnt over years, which is why that attrition rate of lower and lower people showing up has occurred. So now you need to spend money just to let people know, hey, we're the new Toys R Us. Here's all the cool stuff that we're doing to address your problems. That is a major cost within itself as well.
I could see Disney not buying it at all, for the reasons you mentioned, but then I was also thinking of this. There are Disney stores that already exist in the world. So now Disney could say, well, look, we have all these Avengers Infinity War products. We have a Star Wars property coming out. We have just Marvel in general. We have superheroes. They already sell all those things. So now they can just say, okay, so now you're saying we can't sell all of our Hasbro tie-in products, all of these things at Toys R Us now. So now people have to come to us to get their latest Spider-Man thing. So, okay, they're going to buy the kid a Spider-Man figure. Maybe they'll sit around and buy a T-shirt too. Maybe they'll also. So now all of a sudden, the Disney stores would become these hubs of, I need to get the new Han Solo figure, I need to get the new Spider-Man figure, and we're going to throw a T-shirt in there too. We're going to get some other things. Oh, I love Beauty and the Beast. We're going to get that coffee mug for my wife. All of those things. Now all of a sudden, Disney doesn't have to worry about that money going through Toys R Us and then getting filtered down to them. Now they are the direct retailer of their own products.
Well, we also
this literally sucks if you're a DC Warner Brothers fan, because now where are you going to go? You're going to have to go to one of two places instead of that third new idea of going, oh, I'm going to go over to the Disney store and get these things now. Now you're not going to be able to get those DC products.
And I want to talk a little bit more about the DC, but one last thing on the Toys R Us. The other big thing too is no one right now knows what deals Toys R Us have with these current providers. So there might be a reason why you don't see the Hasbro toys at Disney stores, because there might be a thing that says, hey, it can only go.
You do.
No, but I'm like, you don't see a Legend at a Disney store.
Yeah, you
even
do.
though it's. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you only saw Diamond Select.
No.
Okay, so I take that back. But in a lot of cases, even beyond that, Toys R Us has negotiated terms with these companies that say, hey, maybe we get this stuff a week sooner, or for such a period of time, we're the only one that can carry this item, then it can go out to market everywhere else. So not knowing those terms, once those leave, it's going to give, it's going to create a vacuum in the marketplace where it's going to get filled in one way or another. And to the DC thing, other than the multiverse figures, which you see in Target and Walmart, you don't see the Teen Titan figures that you can see at Toys R Us. You don't see all of the current Justice League TV. That section is so small in Walmart and Target, and it's going to make it so much harder if you're a DC fan like myself to get the toys that you really want to see.
Now, with this though, if Toys R Us falters and we want those products, clearly we do, because you're on this page and you read our things and stuff. If you want those things, does that make it tougher for the comic book stores now, or does it make it more of a resource now for people who are like, well, I can't get it at Toys R Us, I'm going to go to my comic book store and either order it directly from them or hope that they have it. So that becomes a whole new selling point for comic book stores. Like we know the one Heroes here in near Lumberton, New Jersey, where they're a great store, and they actually sell a lot of things that we want, like Mezco 112s. They have vintage figures, but they have a lot of the new figures. But then it's hard for them to keep up.
And like for just in our own personal lives, like we shop. I still shop at my local comic book shop. Yes, do I go to the big toy stores for a lot of stuff that I can't get there? But we do promote, go to your local toy stores, go to your local comic book shops, because when they dry up, we're all in trouble, because you're not going to have, other than the online market, you're not going to get a chance to grab Mezco 112 figures.
Speaking of online market, Jason Nelson said before all this stuff, he was asking whether Toys R Us could survive on just an online format.
I don't think so. I think there's a recognition of a name brand. So if you're grandma and grandpa and you actually shop online, which most grandparents don't, you can say, yeah, I can go to that and buy those products there. But my parents, who are grandparents, they just give the kids their own Amazon wish lists and just click, 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 click. Christmas is done. Are they going to go set up a whole new account at Toys R Us and go through that when Amazon has literally everything they want? Probably not. I don't think that Toys R Us as an online retailer could survive against Amazon's just reputation alone.
I agree with Bob. I think that Toys R Us had an opportunity to survive in the online space by utilizing their brick and mortar stores as fulfillment centers, because then they could have saved money on their shipping and fulfilling the needed order, so whoever had the material closest would have gotten it. The problem now is you're going to lose the leases on these spaces in bankruptcy. So even if they grab one or two or three large fulfillment centers, If they don't have the money to go out and do it themselves, so they're going to have to work with a partner. When they work with that partner, that cost will be very high, and it's all about how quickly they can reemerge from here. If you have a 9-12 week shutdown process, the uptime to get a couple fulfillment centers up, inventory management system in place, and connected online e-commerce platform, and re-advertise, purchase the Toys R Us name, because Toys R Us can't stay solvent unless they sell everything and then someone buys the name. So it's not like they can just say, hey, we're going to change our whole model. They've got to pay back this $4.9 billion before that happens. So if they can do that, I don't know that they can get back. I mean, they're going to miss the holiday season 2018, which is their bread and butter every year.
Oh, every year.
Which is what put them in this position, because they overbought. They overbought on large items they couldn't move, and they didn't move out old stock. So people were coming in and not having anything that they wanted to purchase.
Right.
And since, all their space was used up with that, that's why they're sitting going, wow, we couldn't make the payments that we needed to make today. So if they miss the next holiday season, could somebody come out in a year and a half as Toys R Us? I'm sure you'll see that. I don't think that they'll get back 15 to 20% of the space. They may now be competing with Entertainment Earth and Big Bad Toy Store.
Yeah.
But again, they already have, Big Bad Toy Store's got 12 years on them in that e-commerce space of online retail. So they're going to have a steep learning curve, and if somebody has the money, I think that they could eventually survive, but it will never be what you know. It'll be Toys R Us in the name, and that only. And where they are now, it's not like as much as I love Toys R Us, if we all loved Toys R Us the amount that we're all saying today, they wouldn't be in this position.
Right.
So for the majority of the public or the non-collectors, they don't have that love or that cachet for Toys R Us anymore. And that's also a statement on where our economy is today anyway. They all care about how much money, and we do it ourselves. I mean, we'll beat somebody up for trying to sell a $20 Legend for $25 shipped, which is, it's insane. I mean, just the cost, you'd be $27, $28, $29 into it to ship the thing. So knowing that everybody's worried about those final dollars, and they're already going to Walmart or Target or shopping online on Amazon, they're going to continue to do so. So that cachet, it'll play with me. I'm a collector. I'll go check out Toys R Us online, and I hope that they could still get exclusives that I could get, because you know what? I'm a Toys R Us kid, Bob.
Aww.
But
speaking of Toys R Us kids, I was talking to Bob earlier today, and he was saying this: the change from people of me and like Dave's generation, or people even younger, they're not playing with action figures anymore.
Well, that's another big problem. You've got kids that we had to utilize our imagination a lot more with our action figures.
That's not slamming kids. It's today and saying that they don't use their imagination. It's just their imagination now is when they log in, they go into the portal, and they're into a whole different world that's right in front of them. They don't have the imagination of, okay, I have Thanos, and now I'm gonna have all my heroes, DC and Marvel guys are all gonna take this guy on, and who are my bad guys that are gonna be working with Thanos, and that's gonna be my adventure today in my backyard. Kids don't play that way anymore.
Well, and the truth of the matter is if I had an iPad or you had an iPad when you were a kid, we would be in the same place as the current generation. Right. You know what I mean? So it's not a knock on the generation. It's that as technology advances, you handle things differently. Bob's generation played outside a lot more than even my generation did. Yeah. And so you're going to continue to see that. And again, we had no choice but to go, let me take my good guy and bad guy and imagine these epic scale, oh man, I want every one of my favorite Marvel characters fighting the big bad. You could go see it in April this year, guys.
Right.
We have the technology today to make your imagination a reality, which is something that was not there before.
And if it's a Disney property, you have a cartoon that's going to come out after the movie's over that's going to keep it in your mind as you go. So you're not creating the adventure. It's, like you said, it's completely played out for you. That didn't happen when I was a kid because we had 3 to 4 years between Star Wars films. So you had to live out other little adventures until you got to the big adventure that came out in the movies. Now there's a Star Wars movie every year, and you actually have life and death situations where characters actually die off and don't come back. Do you want to play with somebody who's dead? No, not really. And you also don't have enough time to let your child's imagination to build up, well, what happened after this? Well, you already know because it's less than a year later. You've already gotten a cartoon that tells you what's going on. You already have another movie that's slated to come out. There's no time for you to enjoy the property just as a fantasy adventure of people traveling through space fighting the big bad guy.
And you got to talk about cost as well, because now one Legend, one Multiverse, one Black Series figure is $19.99. Somebody posted an ad from the Toys R Us magazine years and years back. I guess it would have been 1989. The Ecto 1 was $19.99. So if you think about it, those figures were $3.50 to $5.50 at that time. So if you're an adult, do I want, before you could have gotten your kid a half a dozen toys for what you get one toy nowadays.
My Star Wars Death Star, which I'm not sure if it came out in 78 or 79. It probably came out in like 79. Has a price sticker on it for $19.99. That is a Star Wars space station for you to play with all your other figures that cost $2.99, three something a piece. That was $19, and that was a lot of money for my parents to spend back in the late 70s, early 80s. And now that's the equivalent of getting one of these guys.
Yeah.
Not this guy, because he costs a lot more. But one of these figures is now that. So are you going to go out and buy your kid every Star Wars figure there is, who may not even play with it?
Yeah. All right, so as we digress from the Toys R Us topic, we're going to try to continue to engage you guys, open up these lives to just whatever's going on in the toy industry. We have this unique chance here to speak, as collectors, but, get your opinions and voice your opinions in the collecting industry to be heard by toy companies. So help us do that. So like this stuff, go on YouTube. If you're on the page and you're still listening or jumped back into the second live, which I don't think a lot did, please like our corporate page as well. Even though we've got almost 31,000, we should be at 31,000 members hopefully by Friday. The corporate page only has like 2,000 likes. So go like that. Help us, because the more that you help us, the more we can tell the toy companies, what you guys are feeling. We got anything? Or
Jason Nelson was just saying, I remember getting $5 for my birthday as a kid and going to KB to pick out TMNT.
There you go. So, and like right now, I go with my son. The thing that we're doing is my son's 6 years old. Am I going to buy him Legends? No. Will I buy them when they go down to $11 on Amazon? Yes.
Or go to $5 at
or
Five Below?
$5 at Five and Below. But right now, when we go to Target, he likes the new Avengers series. It gives you one figure, or Groot and Raccoon, which is just one.
Yeah.
You get like an accessory and a gem. And you know what he said to me yesterday, which was great? He goes, "Daddy, do you know that Thanos wants these gems?" That's what he said to me. And he's 6 years old. When I was 6 years old, I was like, Shredder. That was the extent of what I knew. And these kids, because again of technology, can be out there. So check us out on all the platforms. Instagram, we drop our toy hunts on. YouTube, you'll see Into the Wild. We repost all of these things there for you. These things have been getting more and more views, so we're going to continue to do them. We're going to have some coming up now that are just going to talk about the page in general. Because, people have some questions about just the state of what we do, and we want to make sure that we address them. So if nobody has anything left, which I don't think so, thank you so much for being with us and letting us rant to you guys for probably an hour or so.
If you watch us on YouTube, thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much. You guys have a great day.